I'm Brian Cook. I'm a senior researcher in health behaviors at the Nuffield Department of Primary Care Health Sciences at the University of Oxford. And I'm working on the LEAP project here, which stands for Livestock, Environment, and People. It's a 4-year long Wellcome Trust funded project that's looking at the big pictures around how what we eat affects our health, society, and planet. The particular angle that we're looking at specifically is looking at the consequences of meat production and consumption. What we know about the food we eat is that it certainly does have a big impact on the environment, and the ruminants, especially beef and lamb, have a big impact on global warming and also in terms of biodiversity loss and sometimes in terms of water pollution as well. So the LEAP program brings together researchers from all different fields across the university to answer some of these important questions. A colleague at our LEAP project here in Oxford, Marco Springman, has done some research looking at what changes we need to make in society to keep within the so-called planetary limits of environmental sustainability. And when it comes to meat consumption, his calculations have said that in wealthier countries where we eat more meat, we need to reduce the amount of beef we eat by about 89%. So there's a big need for shifts in our diet more towards plant-based eating. And we know that in general, plant-based food choices are much better for the environment. So our work package is looking at how we can help people to make those decisions and what we can learn from behavioral sciences to nudge people towards those healthier and more sustainable food choices. So we look at things like default positioning of choices. So for example, if you have a vegetarian option at the top of menu, that's the default choice that people see, and that's been shown to increase people's selection of that product. In other things, such as putting the meat-free products into the meat aisle in a supermarket, a research that we've done has also been found that to be effective at increasing people's selection of those. Another strategy is availability, we call it. So increasing the ratio of meat-free to meat options within a category, such as shifting the number of hot meat meals within your lunchtime menu from 3 meat and 1 veggie to 2 meat, 2 veggie. That's been shown to be a rather subtle way of increasing people's purchasing of veggie options. Other things such as social norm messaging. So we know that people are very much influenced by what other people are doing. So sometimes people have used messages within a supermarket or restaurant environment to tell people that other people are trying to make a choice around adding more plant-based eating. We found that within this kind of research, at least preliminary results, we've found that if you, instead of saying that a lot of people are making this choice, if you focus on the process of change, so-called dynamic norms, where people are trying to make the shift over time, that may be more effective as a social norm message in this area. One other one I'll talk about is the eco-labeling. So that's one where we're doing a lot of research ourselves right now. We know that when people go to make food purchases, they have a general idea, often these days, that things like beef and lamb are not as good choices as plant-based options. But in general, we don't have a lot of information at the point of purchase about what actually is the best environmental choice. So it would be really good if people had that information at hand like they do right now on many packaged products that tell you about the nutrient label and the nutrient content of food. So that's one where we're doing a lot of testing ourselves to see whether environmental impact values, or eco-labels, actually have an impact on what people buy. And what we've seen so far, at least in a virtual environment where we're able to test it, is that it does make a significant impact on what people buy. If we look at the trends in meat consumption and plant-based eating in the UK, for example, are people eating less meat and eating more vegetarian options? It's a surprisingly difficult question to answer. We've looked at the government's National Dietary and Nutrition Survey that tracks what people consume every couple of years. And when we look at that analysis, we have seen a reduction in meat consumption over the last decade, for example. We also see that red meat especially has gone down more than others. And in fact, it's been an increase in poultry as people see red and processed meat as having some negative health outcomes. So they often switch to white meat and poultry consumption. We also see that the reduction in meat in the last decade has been a bit quicker for men than for women. We also look when we look at different generations, we see that most generations have actually also been decreasing the amount of meat that they eat. Yet curiously, the younger generation, who actually at baseline eat less meat than any others, have actually over the last decade been slightly increasing the amount of meat that they eat. Again, that might be consuming more poultry than red and processed meat. So we look at the impact of COVID as well. It's too early to say exactly whether the changes that we've seen in consumer purchasing are going to persist. A year from now, that's definitely something we want to look at. But we know when the panic buying that happened earlier this year, a lot of people were buying a lot more meat. People were going back to the classics, what they know, what they feel comfortable with. People are doing a lot more home cooking, and there hasn't been a lot more options to be able to eat outside the home. We know that if you look at the meat consumption or meat purchases compared to last year, things like beef and other things are still up compared to last year. So we don't know to what extent the increases that we're seeing right now are overtaking the decreases that we've seen over the last decade. What we also know is when we look at the meat alternative products out there, the many different kinds of veggie sausages and veggie burgers, those have been selling well, but we also have some insights that consumers may be seeing these as being a bit too unnatural and a bit too processed right now. So I think there's going to be a shift in producers in looking at more whole food alternatives to these kinds of meat products. And I think other companies that can position themselves to offer whole food alternatives rather than more processed, these kind of meat mimic products, may be better positioned to serve customers in the future. So what's next for the LEAP project? So as I mentioned, we've got lots of researchers across the university looking at various aspects of the food system and how it impacts on health and the environment. For us, when in the area of consumer behavior, the big part for us going forward will be to working with a variety of partners to run some research trials in real consumer settings, so we can actually have some good evidence of what works in the real world to nudge people towards these healthier, more sustainable food choices. So for us, it's a huge opportunity and a huge benefit to be able to work with a great partner like Compass UK to be able to do some of this research and answer some of these big questions going forward.